Welcome to A Bit of Board Games, a casual podcast documenting the many failures and hopefully successes of Waffle Games, as we learn the ins and outs of board game design and self-publishing. Join us on this journey as we talk about a bit of life, a bit of design, and a bit of board games. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode, and specifically episode 3 of A Bit of Board Games. It is March 7th, 2022, and Baby Watch is still ongoing. There have been signs that we really thought he was going to come this past weekend, and he didn't. So, still just waiting. We're like, dude, let's go. Stop teasing us. Let's just get on with this, dude.
Are there things you can do to help, spur little baby along?
I mean, yeah, and there's a lot of myths like, oh, eat spicy food and go on walks. However, it's like 12 degrees this morning and we got 3 inches of snow last night.
It makes it a little bit more difficult.
I'm not going to go on a walk. Like we could, but then we have to, if we bring our daughter on the walk, having a stroller on like snowy, icy sidewalks is super annoying. So I'm not going to do that.
Speaking of which, pretty tired of the winter at this point. I mean, I love Colorado for all it has to offer, but man, winters here are just so long. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, dude, it was 70 degrees like 3 days ago.
It was great. It was really great. We played some volleyball with the fam.
Nice.
It was a good time. I can't wait to go fishing, honestly. I want to get back up, do some river fishing. Been loving that the past couple of years, but it's just so unmotivated to go up into the mountains when it's already so cold outside,
Yeah.
But
Anyway, we were like, I was wearing shorts when it was like 70. I went to work wearing shorts like 3 days in a row, and then I like wore them again the next day and it was like 40, and I'm like, oh, maybe I just like, part of me just, I really wanted to be able to wear them, and I wanted it to be warm.
Right.
But,
you like will it into existence.
Right. I'm like, it's warm. And then the next day was like 20 and then snowing. And then today was 12. But don't worry, by the weekend, it's going to be like 50 and 60 again. So
it is Colorado. So we do have that going for us. You never know what you're going to get week by week, day by day. So yeah, absolutely.
Granted, I think this is still better than like, the times where I've lived in like Midwest area or even like East Coast. The East Coast, not as bad, but like Midwest where it's just like gray for like months. And cold.
Yeah, you never see the sun.
Oh my goodness, dude! We were visiting my wife's family in the Chicago area, like shortly after Christmas, and I think it was gray the whole time. And like 3 of the days we were there, it was like freezing rain, and so like we're cooped up in the house with my daughter, who is a toddler and just like wants to go do stuff and play,
right,
and like when we're just cooped up like that, like it's not good for anyone, because then she's getting all like, she wants to be outside and get fresh air, like we can't go and do activities and things like that. So
she's getting stir crazy, which means you're getting super stir crazy.
yeah So it's just I'm glad we're here in Colorado where it's like it can be really, really nice weather sporadically, even though it just feels like a tease sometimes. So
I feel ya. I mean, man, I'm excited for spring, but what we do have going for us is that we have something we can be working on while it's still cold outside.
That's right. Being indoors makes us, work on other things. So specifically now, working on this game that we
are we doing a little? Are we doing a little reveal today? Is that what we're doing?
Say a general reveal. There's no like we don't want to talk about the title for the game, because that could definitely change. It's a working title right now, but I think we could talk about the general story, which we kind of touched on a little bit, like with the artificers and stuff last time. So we'll hit like what this story is about, and then the gameplay summary, and then talk a little bit about kind of the phase that we're in now, working on the game and stuff like that. So I'll just go over the story summary real quick here. So we mentioned last time kind of about the artificers, and it's kind of a fantasy themed game. So story you're playing as a member of the Artifice clan, and each of the players is a member of the clan that has come of age in their apprenticeship, and they're going through these trials of like to craft different blueprints and stuff to become a full-fledged artificer. And that is done by... Take it away, Trevor.
You want me to go through the gameplay sort of stuff?
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. So the players, and I don't know if we have a number of players that we're going to have. I think we're thinking somewhere from like 2 to 6 right now. Is that probably accurate?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So something that's kind of what we're shooting for. So these players are going to choose from these blueprints. They're going to be cards that are that they're going to craft from 3 different categories, and we'll get more into depth of what those categories are as we get further along. But they're going to have to forge these blueprints from each of these different categories, and they can focus in more on one as opposed to all of them, and kind of play the style that they want. But they're going to have to reach a certain point threshold in order to graduate from their apprenticeship and become kind of like what you're talking about, this full-fledged artificer. So some of these items are going to have multiple tiers, which is something we're talking about, and that it will require that they have more resources in order to actually build them. But by doing that and going for the higher tiers, it could potentially offer more points if crafted at that higher tier. Other blueprints are going to require maybe fewer resources to craft, but will then obviously reward fewer points. And so that's kind of the main sort of story and playthrough. The end game is triggered when the player reaches a certain point threshold and has crafted at least one of each type of these blueprints that we're talking about. And so that's kind of the general direction. Anything in there that I'm missing?
Did you talk about the shade cores?
No, I didn't talk about any of the items.
No specifics.
Used.
Okay.
Yeah,
we'll go into that.
Okay.
I mean, shade cores. What is that? I don't.
What's a shade core, Stephen?
Never heard of that before. Anyway, yeah, I think the goal of with this is, like we said, to be kind of like a fun, engaging game, and we want it to play in what, like 30 to 45 minutes or something.
Yeah, we don't want it to be super long, so we're trying to, and that's another thing, is as we're working through this, we're trying to, plan for a shorter to mid-length game, but it's hard to do when you haven't gone through the whole process. But yeah, anyway, keep going.
Yeah, we don't know how long the game's going to be when we don't have a game built yet.
Right. Exactly. You're reading my mind.
Yeah. And yeah, I think kind of what we're hoping for people to have a kind of a sense of thrill when they like accomplish the task and get their complete their blueprints and start earning those points, but also have that sense of tension of like, which cards do you want to go for? Like, which ones are your opponents going to be interested in? Because we're planning on these blueprint cards to have abilities that you can then use once crafted as well, which could affect the gameplay. So the 3 categories that we're kind of focusing on at the moment. Again, disclaimer right now: anything we say can and most definitely will be changed at some point.
It's almost a guarantee.
However, at the moment, we've got a lot of the stuff probably won't change. The general things probably won't change. But we've got 3 categories of blueprints, and that is, and trying to think like story wise, like what kind of items would these artificers be creating? And so the 3 categories are defensive blueprints, combat blueprints, and utility blueprints. So combat ones will be like obviously weapons and things like that. In terms of how they're actually going to be used in this game, when you create them, these combat items might give you some abilities that could then damage or affect your opponent's items and your opponent's blueprints. Not in ways that's going to be like, oh, I just created this blueprint and now it's just gone entirely. Like, that doesn't feel fun. But it might degrade the quality slightly or affect the overall points that they have for that.
Or just slow the player down in general, right? If they're ahead, you could have, I mean, because this isn't a co-op game, you can pick and choose kind of who you want to defend from or go against, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then also being able to counter that stuff too. So then we'll have defensive blueprints. So if that's more your style, you can then have these blueprints that maybe it's a shield, like the ability gives you some kind of shielding effect that then blocks an attack or other things. We're working on a lot of different kind of more in-depth ones. I'm just covering kind of, these are like the basic abilities you can have, combat would be kind of focused on other players, defense is helping yourself, and then the utility ones will kind of be other kind of random things. So we made mention of the shade cores earlier, which are like the main like power source that powers the item, like the forge, to be able to craft these items. These cores, you actually have to fill them as an option for one of your actions in your turn. You have to bring like the empty core, the shell, which, okay, let's back up a second. So your players are going to have a resource, whether that's gold or some kind of currency, in a sense that they're like allocated for these categories, by their the master artificers or something, to then right, to accomplish these tasks and create these blueprints. So players are going to choose, if they want to, how they want to spend their gold, whether that's on blueprints themselves, on hypothetical item cards that may or may not exist in the game, that have other abilities, and then also to buy these like empty cores, which then you have to use these empty cores to fill them with the shade light energy, which is the main source of energy that was harnessed through this forge. I realize we didn't touch on all that story stuff, but that'll be later. So there's a certain energy source that you have to then fill these cores with, and that's going to have that kind of element of chance where you have to roll a die and to see like, how successful you are, if you're successful at filling your core, or if it fails and blows up in your face, or if like, hey, like that was a crazy successful one and maybe I filled 2 cores with 1. Things like that. And then there'll be items that affect that you can like affect that randomness. So like one of the utility items may be like a certain item that allows you to re-roll your die or something to that effect. So anyway, utility
helps improve the RNG aspect.
Yeah, so utility may be something that like gives you more gold passively on your turns. It could be general things that are going to help you on your turns in the future. So that's kind of the general thing with the abilities of each of the classes, each of the categories that you're kind of working towards blueprints in. And again, you'll have to complete at least one blueprint in each category. But you could focus like, hey, I want more utility, so that you can then, make your turn more valuable in the future or something. So you can like do more in later turns, something like that.
Right. And we're kind of going in a direction that every game is going to feel different based on the blueprints that you potentially draw or pick from, based on the characters that you choose to play as that maybe give different enhancements or different, opportunities for maybe crafting a certain type of blueprint easier.
Yeah.
That we're adding in a couple RNG aspects. We want to be a little cautious with how much RNG is in the game, because we want the player identity to feel good and not completely up to chance.
Right.
But yeah, I think we're riding that line pretty well at this point. I think a lot of this is going to come down to actually getting these items and getting these blueprints specifically in our hands, so that we can start working through how it feels. How long is this game actually going to take, based on what one full turn entails, and,
right.
and all of that is something that Stephen and I keep talking about. Even today, leading up to the podcast, we were talking about some aspects of, how would it feel to do this, and how long do you think it'll take to complete this action? And
I don't know. We haven't done it.
Yeah, we haven't done it. So we simply, I think kind of the next step for us at this point is to just start developing, and we already have, and we can talk about this a little bit, some blueprints specifically, so that we can start getting them in our hands and start play testing with that. I think it's potentially a next step for us as we're going forward.
Yeah. So we are presently moving on into the prototyping phase of this game.
Very exciting.
Yeah, so we've got specifics. We listed out kind of in detail the specific types of components. Like blueprints are going to be cards, and thinking through how many we want of those. Some of these, like the shade cores and like your currency gold, are going to be like punch out tokens, things like that. So then thinking through, we have all these hypothetical things that we're like, I think it would be like this, and I think this would be good. But now that we're actually planning out how to actually physically create this stuff, and then we can get it in our hands and actually start playtesting it to see what is fun, and if the whole game is actually good, and if we want to keep, obviously we're going to keep tweaking the game and keep working towards it to to get to a place where it is fun. But we want to make sure like the actual like core of the game is fun before we start adding all these extra, item cards or other, things elements that manipulate the gameplay. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I think we just kind of planned out right before. So in general, when we're recording podcasts, we meet, Trevor and I like talk for like at least an hour beforehand, just on some planning and detailing, like working on the game itself. And so that's kind of what we do right before recording, so that it's kind of fresh in our minds. And then we, like, hey, this is what we were working on today. So we're focusing on the actual prototyping next. And so I think for me, I wanted to just touch, like, I've done some prototypes for other game ideas that I've had in the past. So in case people were curious, how I like actually create the components, if you're like, what should I do next? For a lot of these things, it's like the first prototype is going to be very basic and not pretty at all. It's just like I've got some card stock that I use, and then I figure out kind of in my head, or like look up what size cards we want to use, like what our standard sizes for that, so that when I'm actually creating,
which I had no idea about, by the way. I thought that cards were cards. I didn't realize you had like 30 different options.
There's a lot, and you can always do like custom sizes too. Like if that is what your game needs, it might cost a little bit more, but like to do custom sizes, is definitely possible. But there's some pretty standard sizes for cards, for, punch out tokens, and like for, dice and things like that. And so you don't necessarily have to have that when you're creating your first prototype. I just visually like having kind of the final, at least, size, so I get an idea of like what kind of information and how much information I can fit on there in a way that's not going to be like convoluted or anything like that.
Right.
So yeah, I think starting out, like, any kind of paper card stock is definitely better. It has a little bit heavier feel. You can have card stock, cut out those sizes of cards, or just choose a size and be like, hey, this is what I'm going to do for my prototype. Just get out the number of cards you need, and then you can just draw on with like pencil, kind of write the information. You don't need like artwork. You don't need, icons and things like that. I think for the initial prototype, you want just like to draw on it with like a pencil so that you can erase stuff and change things. Whether that's for example, for ours, we'll need like the amount of gold it costs to buy the blueprint. We'll need the amount of points you get for completing it, and then like what the ability is. So I think for the prototype, we'll just kind of fill in information, and then that way, as we're actually testing, and if it's not fun or something needs to be tweaked, we can just erase it and then write the new value and try it that way.
Right. It's truly function over fashion at this point, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The key is just getting something tangible to play and test. Like you can have an idea and just tweak the idea, to whatever end, and on paper, so many times, but you'll never actually know if it's fun or how it feels until you physically get it out there. So yeah, you'll need to just need to test it.
And the other thing is just balance in general, right? So you're talking about, maybe needing to tweak numbers and things because you want it to feel good. You want what the amount of effort you put into crafting something or building something or buying something to feel like what you did was worth it. And so that whole balance aspect, just like in a video game, people talk about how this character is overtuned or underbalanced. It's a very similar principle in board games too. You don't want anything that you're doing to feel like was time wasted based on what your objective is. If it's something that's maybe costs less, maybe the reward is going to be less. You want it to kind of make sense in a player's mind as they're trying to plan out what their next step is in the game.
So. Yeah, we don't want any blueprints to be ones that people are like, oh, that one again, I don't want to do that one.
Right.
We want them all to have some kind of function that has value. So like that way, when there's like a certain number of blueprints available to purchase, we want them all to be viable options that people actually might be interested in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then for prototyping, once you have all that stuff, just you need to you can even just play it by yourself, like just play all the people just to see how if everything works well. It's definitely recommend playing with another person, because then you can get the back and forth feedback like Trevor and I have talked about before. And then as you go, like once you have like some pretty solid ground on what you're doing there, I do like to create a more detailed prototype I might go into like Illustrator or something and create like a template for that card and have kind of more polished icons and things, because then it just starts feeling better as you get further in the process. And I have a 3D printer too, so like printing tokens and things like that is way more fun, having that kind of tactile feel, but definitely not needed, just things that I like using.
Yeah, very cool. And so pending baby arrival, had we said his name yet, by the way? Are we saying his name on the podcast?
I don't know if we've said names of our kids. I mean, I think it's fine. Henry is his
King
name.
Henry.
Yeah, so my daughter is Cece, and then my son, when he's born, will be Henry.
Little Henry. Okay, so pending Henry's arrival, King Henry's arrival, Stephen and I are planning over this next week to connect in person, and a lot of the stuff we've been doing, by the way, is virtual. We've been talking over Discord, a lot of this stuff it's just easier to plan as we're going through stuff.
And documenting on Google Docs.
Right, exactly.
You definitely want to keep track of kind of what you're talking about and things.
Even basic ideas we've found you don't want to lose sight of, because even just a week going by, you come back and go, oh man, I forgot that whole mechanic that we talked about last week, and you have to take extra time to reflesh that out. But
yeah.
But anyway, so we're planning on again, unless King Henry arrives here soon, and even if he does, we'll try to still make something happen. But we're going to plan to get together in person to start actually making some of these cards and play testing with each other, so that it's not going to be a true play test. We're going to have very basic function. Some of the main mechanics, we're leaving out a lot of things, but we want to get a beginner feel towards the game, so that as we're adding elements, we have kind of a baseline to be working from.
Yeah. And another piece of I don't know, advice, something like that. I don't know if it's really advice. Something that's helpful when you're working on a game. Don't feel like it's a bad thing to work on multiple games at once, because you might come up with a solution in like another game that'd be like that triggers then an idea you have for this one. Or also, while you're working on stuff, playing other board games, or even just watching, just thinking about life as you're going through it, like in different ways, like, oh, like how could I make a game about people getting on a public transportation and getting off at the right stop? I don't know. Just like thinking through.
Are you hinting at a next game?
Not at all. But what I'm trying to say is just like, you don't need to just be thinking and planning your game in like a dedicated session of planning your game. You should be thinking about just different things in life in that way, because you never know what might trigger, like, oh, like that could be a good way to do this mechanic or this this theme or whatever like that. Like who knows, like where inspiration will strike.
That's coming from the creative part of this team. Because I would have never had a tip like that, but I think that is very wise for sure.
Yeah, I'm known for being wise, so
I know.
At least I know myself for being wise.
Yeah, I think I'm known for being really strong and handsome. I think that's just what I've heard. But
you? Just kidding.
Dang it, Steven.
I mean, sorry, I was talking to someone else, something else entirely. Yeah, Trevor, super handsome and strong, and
for sure. Since we're on this trajectory, do we have anything else that we wanted to go over before we kind of headed out?
Nah. Well, I think that's probably about it for this episode here. Again, if you want to reach out to us, guys, go to bitwafflegames.com, and there's a contact form there, which, by the way, Trevor has been abusing that contact form and messing with me constantly.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think Obi-Wan Kenobi actually was reaching out to you.
Yeah, and Angry Mother.
The Waffle Police.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, if you have any real questions or anything like that, feel free to send a message in that contact form at bitwafflegames.com. And as we have, we'll probably take some photos of our prototype, even just like the really ugly like first one.
Yeah,
just to absolutely. We'll throw those on our socials, which again, they're all at Good grief, I always have freaking issues saying these names. At Waffle Games. We'll try to throw up some photos on there every once in a while of the steps we're working on, or the
show some of the prototypes that you were talking about with just even the basic numbers that you were describing. It doesn't have to be pretty, but just kind of first function sort of things.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to go follow on those. We're not going to be doing like social media a ton, but I figure if I have any photos, I'll post stuff like that, or anything worthwhile.
Yeah,
definitely we'll share some of that. So, all right, guys. Yeah. Well, thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next week, unless baby comes, and then we'll see you as soon as we can.
Fingers crossed for King Henry. Yep. Yeah. We'll see you guys.
Bye.